afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here for a very special presentation. We are honored to have Dr. Adolfo Lara. He is a UHD and Scholars Academy alumnus. He is a microbiologist at the Houston Health Department Medical Microbiology Division. He is currently participating in a program by the Association of Public Health Laboratories as an outreach ambassador. And he is here to talk to you about career opportunities within the public health laboratories. A warm welcome for Dr. Adolfo Lara.
Hello, everyone. Mercedes, thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you to everybody here at UHD for being welcoming. And so I just want to start off by saying thank you to you as well for being here. Today is the only Tuesday, April 11th, 2023, any of us are ever going to live, right? And we're all here. We've conversed. So my goal is for you to walk away with at least one thing, learned here. And so as it was mentioned, I kind of sat where you sat, but not really because this is a new building. This building was not around when I was here, but I was a student. I was in Scholars Academy. I was a peer mentor. I came to seminars, I did the field trips, research internships, all of that good stuff. And so, yeah, here I am at the research experience, SRC, which I know is happening this week. And then there I am in the Scholars Academy family photo. And then finally, I was part of the major opportunity outreach campaign that UHD did in that year when I graduated. And, they put me on a billboard. Then they took that billboard down because student enrollment went down by 13%. Kidding. And so, yeah, I'll put a pin on my story, and I'll tell you more about what I've done. But first, here's just a brief outline of the items we're going to discuss. And so I'll talk to you about what public health is. We can chat about just laboratories in general. And then from there, we'll see what public health labs do, the roles that they have, who works in them, and then why it's interesting to work in this field. And then after that, just what PHLs have to offer you. So the first question I just want to kind of discuss is what is public health? And for this, I'm actually going to ask you to take out your phone, and we're going to go to this slido.com website, and then go ahead and input this number here, the 8865101. And it's just 3 quick questions just to kind of get to see how many of you know if this is your first time hearing about public health or not. So let me see, I think I can do... Great. So I'll just move on to the next question here. So yeah, around half and half. So the next question is, have you ever considered a career in this field, public health? And then, yeah, show results as well. Okay, and now, final question. And this one's just more of a free response. So within the last 3 years, we kind of take a time machine. So think back as to what words you've learned in these past 3 years that might be related to public health. All good words, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you for participating in this quick exercise. And now we'll go back to the presentation here. So, yeah, we'll just kind of discuss about this. So, does anybody want to share? You can just shout it out loud. When was the first time you heard about public health? If it's not through here. COVID-19, yeah, these past few years, absolutely. Anyone else? Cool. And so, yeah, any interest in careers in public health? I know there's interest in careers in health in general, right? Like medicine, research, biomedical research, but maybe somebody put the answer of epidemiologist there, so maybe that's an interest they might have. That's an option there. And then, yeah, all the words that we kind of discussed. So they were all centered, more or less around COVID and around the pandemic. And so, right, so that process kind of highlighted and brought forward public health into the spotlight. Normally, public health was kind of like behind the scenes, just, doing surveillance, doing any prevention. But once COVID hit, then, that's when things kind of got brought forth. That and many other reasons, right? And so we'll talk about what public health is. So if we think about it, just in a nutshell, it's basically protecting health within the community. And so that's within here in Houston and everywhere else. And so that is done through education, just healthy lifestyles, and research as well. And so again, the scope, can be national, the national level, even at a world level with for example, the WHO, and then even within here in Houston, as I am part of the Houston Health Department, for example. And, something like as local neighborhoods, as epidemiologists, maybe another word you became familiar with was contact tracing, which is where when you have somebody test positive for COVID, and then they basically get interrogated as to what other people they interacted with, and that way you can try to track who may have been the first patient in that cluster. And that can be something as local as a neighborhood. And so, yeah, the ultimate goal of all of this is disease prevention, right? This is one of the fields where, unfortunately, diseases are prevalent and they're around, and some of them might be around for more than we want. For example, antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And so, because of that, we have to have the science to be able to combat these threats. And so specifically through the Association of Public Health Laboratories, basically it's a hub to help support other public health laboratories all over the country. And globally. And so again, that's represented through both state labs and local labs. So we do have a state lab in Austin, and then major cities throughout Texas have their own city labs as well. And so the main method to provide this support is through programs. One of them being education, outreach, being able to be the bridge between scientists and politicians, being able to kind of explain to politicians why certain things in science are important and good for the community overall. Being able to, a field that's coming up is public health informatics, if you're interested in any of those type of fields. That's where you kind of bridge computer science and healthcare. That's a field that is, I would say, coming up. If that's something you want to study, I would say that's a good route to undertake. And then research, leadership development, among others. And so looking a little bit more deeper, more practical things that are done in the lab are, for example, surveillance. So one of them is wastewater. And so wastewater is a technology that's been around for a couple of years, but it was mainly implemented to COVID. And so basically what happens here is, right, not everybody goes to get a swab test, right? Some people do, some people don't, but everybody produces waste. And so what's done there is that wastes are collected by central stations, and then that has genetic information that's extracted, and then it's sequenced, and then you're able to learn about maybe in the northeast area of Houston, there is that specific strain of COVID. And so that was done for a couple of years. And the interesting aspect of this technology is that it's able to predict up to 2 weeks in the future. So that means that, let's say, if we tested that sample today and we got that there was a new Omicron variant, 2 weeks later, we would see that in actual patient samples. So that's something done thanks to public health. Within that, again, just testing, COVID testing, that's one we've all heard of. One you may not be as familiar with is hospital-acquired infections. So those are when you go to the hospital, a surgery is performed, or any intervention of that sort. And even though the institution and the physicians and their assistants try to be as careful as possible, there are times where there are bacteria that form spores, right? And so these bacteria are very resilient, and they get on the equipment, they get on the tools, and then unfortunately they can end up in the patient, and then from there, the patient gets an infection. And a lot of the times, these are antibiotic-resistant bacteria, unfortunately, which means that, they have to be treated with the strongest antibiotics we have, and that's kind of like the limit, right? If those can't do the job, then, you have to do something more like a surgery, or, unfortunately, sometimes that may not even be that helpful. Linking also educational institutions such as University of Houston Downtown with public health science is something we want to kind of highlight through this program. I know that when I was in undergraduate, I did not know a lot about public health. And so, I knew about science. I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I knew I liked biology, but that was kind of it. And so through this program, I'm able to learn about how, what other opportunities there are out there as future scientists you all will be. And so some of the partners we work with as well as the public health lab are hospitals. So for example, some hospitals have the tools to be able to perform other exams, but not some exams we can do. So for example, where I am, we do genetic sequencing of viruses and bacteria. Some hospitals don't have that capacity to be able to do that because it takes a lot of expensive equipment, and then you have to have the expertise to be able to do it and the space. And so because of that, then they send us samples, and we're able to sequence them, have them back to them as fast as we can, and be able to share that information. And so all of this has an effect on us as a community. And so basically trying to keep our food and water safe, as clean as possible. And then also just any times where you have certain diseases pop up as well. COVID was a major one. But for example, there's cases of just right across the hall from where I work, there's a rabies lab. And so they're able to get samples and kind of prevent that from spreading more than it has to. There's a program called Newborn Screening Program where they're able to take blood and cell types from newborn babies to be able to test for specific diseases. And so you're able to capture those ahead of time and be able to provide the necessary treatment to kind of prevent this problem from impeding them of leading a normal life. And so as we all know, public health emergencies, COVID, one of the big ones, but also just examples such as bioterrorism. So maybe sometimes in the news you hear about politicians being sent, funny envelopes that have white powder, right? And so they check that. And so that normally gets sent to a lab. We're one of those. And so we have to perform the test on those samples. And so there is So you have labs here in University of Houston Downtown. The labs we have are similar to those, but in addition to that, we have something called the Biosafety Level 3 labs, which are where you have to wear a full PAPR. You have a little air filter, and then you connect the hose to your helmet, and then you're given air through that. But basically, you're all sealed, and you have to go in a special room, and then from that special room, you go to the lab. And so in the lab, we have biosafety cabinets, and then within those cabinets, that's where we can actually start working with these samples. And so some of the experiments that are done there are something probably you've done here or maybe will do as part of your future classes, which is PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And so you look for specific segments of the DNA for specific agents, and then once hopefully they come out negative, right? And so if they come out negative, then we know that it's not anything to worry about. But if they come out positive, then that's when we get our epidemiology team involved, and then we kind of have to, secure the area. But I just hand off, the data to them, and then they do their thing. And within that too, if you're interested in environmental health, that's also an aspect that's surveilled. And so that also just for, soil testing, and anything that might be a threat to our community. And so we'll shift over to see who works here in the public health labs. So at least in the Houston Health Department, there is a large diversity of educational backgrounds people have. So it varies. A lot of them are microbiologists trained in the lab. A couple of them, we have a couple of teachers who did some lab work before becoming teachers. They were teachers for a couple of years. Then they shifted over to the public health field. Some of these do require certifications. There are some certifications for being a clinical lab scientist, but at least within the Houston Health Department, that's not necessary. I know that I have colleagues that work in hospitals, Methodist, and some of them, they do require special certification. If that's something that you're interested in, I would say go ahead and start looking into that now, so that by the time you kind of graduate, you kind of pair them up together. Otherwise, you graduate, and then you have to study for the test, a couple of months, 3 months, maybe. But if you kind of time them at the same time, then maybe you're able to kind of just get right into it right after you graduate from here, if that's the route you wanna take. And there's also, even though I'm talking here about non-public health careers, there's also opportunities if you don't want to be in the lab. So the Association of Public Health has global programs where they're able to go and provide educational training all over the world. I have a colleague who just came back from Africa a couple of months ago. And so they're trying to get their epidemiologists up and running with their lab, having special workflows, having the correct software to be able to do the studies. And, that's all non-lab stuff. So I know we're all scientists, but sometimes the lab can get tiring. And if that's something you want to pursue, then absolutely there's careers on that as well. And as I mentioned earlier too, if you like to talk and you're able to communicate with people who are non-scientists, perhaps consider something along the lines of being a liaison. So talking to politicians, getting the word out there for scientists, and basically the support we would need to be able to do our work and keep everyone as safe as we can. And so some of the jobs there are, and these are just some. So, you have a chemist. So even within public health, you might kind of associate that with straight biology. But, there are chemistry jobs. There's a colleague I have in New York who does environmental chemistry testing. And then they run their lab in that regard. There's food science, environmental. So in the lab, we also test if there's any cases of food contamination. We might not be one of the only ones to hear about it, but we do get some samples from those outbreaks sometimes. And so a lot of the times, we can kind of trace them back to picnics with food that wasn't really stored as it should have. Or for example, people like to have get-togethers. You leave your potato salad in the car, it gets really warm, and then bacteria, that's a prime environment for bacteria to grow, and then you share with everybody, and then people get sick. And so those type of things are, just clusters we kind of find. Of course, being a microbiologist, and then, as I mentioned, a medical lab scientist, which that specific title does require certification. So I would say, if you're interested in that, go ahead and write that down and, make a note to look it up later. But also bioinformaticians. So I know when I was here in UHC, part of my degree, I had to take Visual Basics. And I'm not dissing computer science because I like it now. But at the time, right, I did not want to take that class. I left it to my last year. Not my last semester, but my last year. And yeah, I didn't find it that interesting at the time. But then once I went on to graduate school, I didn't necessarily do Visual Basics coding, but I did have to do Python coding and R and Shell. And so I had to basically, I took the concepts I learned, but then I had to apply it to a new language. And so that's basically what bioinformaticians do. You're able to take genetic information such as genomes. And so with that, you're able to, when you sequence a genome, let's say a COVID genome, Imagine a Word document that is like maybe like 50 pages long, and it's just A, T, C's, and G's, right? Like that's basically it. And so that's what you have. That's your data. That's what you have to start with. And so as a bioinformatician, your job is to basically write programs to be able to find specific patterns in that data. So looking at the genes, looking at the structure, looking at what proteins these genes can make, testing this genome against another genome to see how different they are, how similar they are, and then that can tell you about how these genomes evolved over time. So all of that. If that's something that's interesting to you, consider a route in bioinformatics. And within that, you also have the alternative to like either be fully dedicated to bioinformatics, just be on your computer, work on your data, but also be able to do lab. So my colleague, he's like 75%, 20%. 75% of the stuff he does is the bioinformatics side, and the other 25% is doing the lab work. Of course, there are, for some positions, especially as you get a bit further along your career within public health, some of them do require these more advanced degrees, such as masters or even PhDs or doctor in public health. And so within that too, like you can have applied scientist masters, biology, chemistry, and then or specializing in public health, like MPH or epidemiology degrees as well. And so, yeah, the locations are varied as well. So there's some at the local level, as I mentioned. We have, Harris County and then Houston Health Department as well. Within the state level, Austin is the hub for our state portion. And then there's even some at the national level. So a lot of locations have their own state lab, just all over the United States. And one point I want to kind of go back to is here with job titles. So as you probably saw in the title slide, my title is being a microbiologist. I started there, it's kind of a spoiler, I'll tell you later, but I started there in 2020, and on 2022, I've been there since. When I got there, the title I received was microbiologist, but I didn't touch bacteria for 2.5 years. I was doing just viral sequencing and viral testing. And so that's important to kind of note because I was really confused because I didn't want to apply for that job because I didn't have the experience as a microbiologist. I did research here with Dr. Morano for a year in microbiology, but I didn't think that was enough. But I read the job description, and they did talk about doing some microbiology, but also doing a lot of molecular biology, which is, PCR, sequencing, all that good stuff. And so because of that, I know I can do that, so I applied, and I was able to get the job. So yeah, and I've noticed that too in other fields, like just sometimes industry as well. The jobs are maybe the names are a bit outdated sometimes. So I would say don't just go by the name of it. Go through the description, see if your skills fit, and then apply. I know that in industry, a big one they like to have is scientist, like that's literally your title, but that's not very descriptive on its own, right? Like it doesn't tell you if you're going to be doing, cancer work or epidemic work or anything along those lines. So yeah, just keep an eye out for the job description as well, and not only the name of the job. Great. So now we're going to kind of shift focus as to why you might want to work in public health labs. I would say the starting point would be like a purpose. And this is not to say that other jobs don't have a purpose, right? All jobs have a great purpose, and it's subjective as to what your purpose is. But if you have a purpose and something along these lines attracts you as a potential career, and not even as a career, if it's one of your interests right now, let's say you're interested in statistics and public health and in geology, and you don't know which one to go with, I would say just try a bit from all of them. If you can have like internships, if you can have research experiences on all of them, it's important to know what you want to do, just as it's important to know what you don't want to do. I had a friend who wanted to be a vet, and like, I love this friend, but halfway through her college experience, she started shadowing, And so she was interested. She loves animals. She still loves animals. But the opportunity she got was she had to go work at a farm, shadow at a farm, and work with horses. And so she was there for a week, and then started Monday. By Friday, she's like, I don't want to be a vet no more because horses smell really bad. All right. And so that's something you want to kind of keep in mind too. Some jobs are, very romantic. They can be very romantic from like the outside looking in, but there might be certain aspects to them that maybe you're just not into it, and that's fine. Like it's completely fine to not want to do something because, I ideally you may not be at that position, for the rest of your life, but you are going to be within the same field or like an adjacent field, and so it has to be something you kind of enjoy to do. You don't want to like go to medical school and then see blood for the first time and then you pass out and now you've made that commitment, right? You have the loans, like you want to be able to, and that's, in a way too, medical schools look for that as well, right? That's why they're stringent about like your requirements because they want to know that you know what you're getting into. So one other benefit is professional development. So right now as Mercedes mentioned, I'm part of a leadership program where the project we're doing is basically this. There's 18 of us that are going around the U.S., and I mean, here within Houston, to be able to talk to students as yourselves about careers in science in general. I know that, you watch TV, you have like medical shows, which are great. We need doctors, absolutely. We need physicians, we need scientists, we need public health workers. And so, as soon as you know what your options are out there, then we're trying to kind of see, if that's something that is interesting to you. So being in UHC, right, and being in Scholars Academy, at least I'll kind of highlight that section. I know that I would be here in school from like 6 a.m. to like 8 p.m., like every day for like 5 years. And that's only because I can't study at home. I would watch TV at home. I would play video games at home. So I would have to stay here and study. And so basically that means I had little to no balance between like my studying and my personal life, right? And then that kind of only stayed the same when I went to get my PhD. And to me, that was like the norm, right? Like, oh, that's what everybody does. And they never really told you that's what you had to do, but I just felt internalized that that's what I kind of had to do to kind of get ahead. And so now shifting over to public health, that's not the case. We are passionate about what we do. Whenever we were at the peak of Delta and Omicron, I was having like 15-minute lunches, and that was it because I was just in the lab testing samples. But by the time I got done with my work, it was time to hand it off to the next team. And they were fine. They were able to manage it. So I was able to kind of improve in my work-life balance. And now that I have it, it's really good to have. It's a great thing to have. Another aspect too is career growth. So I started there, as I mentioned, in 2020, and I've gotten 2 promotions since then. It's been 3 years, and so like that's fairly common. It's a good place to be, and of course with that comes more responsibilities, but also financial increments as well. And it's if one of your goals is to kind of have that stability, then public health jobs can offer that. And as I kind of mentioned earlier before, people get sick. Unfortunately, we have diseases. The way we're kind of treating our planet in certain sections just means that those diseases are going to kind of like keep popping up. So we need to work for it. And so because of that, if you're able to bring great skills and passion to the field, then you have an opportunity to for career growth. How does that saying go? Success is where opportunity meets preparation. So there's an opportunity, right? You bring your tools that you get here at UHD. And of course, there are diverse careers, as I kind of highlighted too earlier. Chemistry, environmental, non-lab roles, lab roles, if that's what you want to do. And then within that, the career growth, potentially having your own lab, potentially being a lab director as well, and having like an impact here on our great community. So within this, I'm just gonna kind of transfer over to now. I'm just gonna tell you a story and tell you a little bit about me, a little more about me in general. And this is just to kind of show you one example of how UHC has helped me. And it's just my example. Take from this whatever it is that works for you. Listen to as many people as you can. Some stories you might not connect with, but if there's something you connect with here, then that's a win. This word cloud is based on stories that my colleagues and I put together. So there's 18 stories. The people here, they're all graduates, bachelor's, master's, PhDs, doctors in public health. And so we just kind of talked about what our story was and how we ended up in the public field. As I mentioned before, I was not too aware of public health opportunities when I was at your stage, but through life and through years and through time, I've been able to pick up a couple of things. So, here's something I just want to highlight, like, research is not a requirement, but it is something you can have that can help you. So something just as simple as being able to, handle a pipette, that, that puts you ahead when you apply for further jobs. Being able to do, make solutions, dilutions, being able to work with bacteria, or whatever organism you have. But even if you don't have those skills, right, doing research does teach you how to critically think about data, how to follow protocols in the way that they should be followed, right, so that you don't kind of deviate and, that way you can test what you're testing strictly. What else? I think that's the one I want to kind of highlight. Yeah, and you see some degrees up there again. The degrees can help you for sure, but it's not even about the degree itself, right? It's about what's behind it, right? Like, for example, here, as you graduate with a bachelor's of science or a bachelor's in art, it's not necessarily the paper. The paper represents your years of struggles, right, here and taking your classes, but it basically represents that you're able to start a project and see it all the way through, right? And that's what we want to kind of see. So based on this story, I would just focus on mine because that's the one I kind of know better. And so, yeah, within here at UHC, I remember going to my first research conference and walking into room 8300, and I walked in through the door, and I saw a poster, and there was a graph of bacterial growth. I didn't know what it was at the time, so I went to the poster, and I saw it, and I was just amazed by the fact that that's something we can quantify, right? Like, to me, bacterial growth was such a complex problem that, we couldn't possibly come close to describing it. But a student, Benedict Koo, he was able to kind of walk me through the process and how it's something that we know, right? Like, we know that bacteria like to grow at a specific logarithm rate, and then, you have your phases, but depending on the nutrients available. And to me, that was just so cool. And so because of that instance there kind of opened up my mind and kind of gave me the liberty to kind of think about science beyond my, self-imposed limitations. I was able to think, and I kind of I kind of started with, not asking questions to, the other extreme where I was asking maybe silly questions, but then I was able to kind of bring it back, right? But in thinking about those questions about what science can do, I was able to kind of learn about how to answer the questions and how to keep my curiosity alive and well. And so I also, and through that interest, I started participating in research internships. Here's a few. So I did one here at UHC, as I mentioned, with Dr. Morano. There's NIH, what was it called? Summer Undergraduate Research Program at UT Health. And so there I did work on both mast cells and neurons doing this technique called electrophysiology. And what that does is you take an electrode and then you go down to the single cell level and then you basically poke the cell and then you stimulate it and you're able to record the electrical activity of the cell. And so with that, you're able to give it a stimulus. And so based on the stimulus, you're able to see if the cell gets bigger or if it gets smaller. And it does so by the process of exocytosis, right? And so because it's phospholipids, they get connected to the cell and they open. And so we were trying to determine allergy medicines based with that project. And so, yeah, I would say if that's something you're interested in, the NIH is a good resource to find your experiences. Another one I did was National Science Foundation Research Experiences for Undergraduate. And that one I did in the American Museum of Natural History. Has anyone seen the movie A Night at the Museum? So that's the museum. I was able to be there for a summer, 2 months. They paid everything. They paid food. They paid flight. I stayed at Columbia dorms, and I was able to work on a 2-month project where my advisor at the time had just gotten back from Antarctica, and she got in a small submarine, went down to like, I think she said 1,000 meters. And so they were able to go down to the seafloor and with the robotic arm just grab a couple of anemones that live in these harsh environments, and then brought them back to New York, and we were able to describe them. And so that was like a new species. We were able to describe them for the first time. And then within that, we also did some genetic work, being able to develop special markers to be able to identify these as new species. And that's something that's still ongoing. So if you're interested in that program, we can chat after. But that's a program that's still ongoing. Through the interview for the NIH program, 2 things happened. One, when I worked with Dr. Morano, I'm a morning person. I was a morning person when I was younger, and then I became a late night person. Now I'm a morning person again. At the time, so I would come in the lab like at 6 a.m., kind of try to get things done. And Dr. Johnson would see me. He would always be printing his test or something. And so I just saw him, and it didn't mean much to me. But he was part of the interview panel that interviewed me for one of the internships. And yeah, he like brought that up. He said, hey, I think I don't have a doubt that you're going to be able to commit to the program because I see you here like at 6 a.m. on Fridays. And you don't have to do that per se, right? Like if that's not your thing, then you don't have to. But kind of basically what I want you to take away from this is that your hard work can be noticed, right? And so, keep at it. And then within that, one thing that kind of relates to my purpose is talking about why I'm kind of doing what I'm doing. And so that story is kind of summarized by Lewis and Clark. So, everybody kind of knows that they went out and explored the United States or, explore the area. And then, so that took bravery to do that, right? And that's kind of like what people like to highlight. But through an advisor, the story, he put to mind that that's important, but it's also important to the fact that they kind of went back and told everybody what they saw, right? And so to me, that's what stood out to me. And that's what I kind of try to do everywhere I kind of been. So, at UHD as a peer mentor, in graduate school, I'm going to outreach events, even here now. And yeah, so thanks to the research experiences, I was able to travel and go to conferences. And then Dr. Morano told me this rule of 3 she has. Basically, as you get prepared to take your next professional step, she suggested I apply to 3 groups of graduate school. The first group, a group that I know I'm going to kind of get in, like 90%. Second group of schools that I'm not too sure if I'm going to get in. And then a third group that I know 1 in a million chance, right? And that's all I had. And so I applied to 3 groups. I applied to like 2 in each. And it turns out that I only got into the last one. I got into the Museum of Natural History. That was my long shot. I didn't get into much for sure once, but I was able to get into the other one. And if I had only played it safe, right, it probably would have taken me a few more years to kind of get into graduate school. So that's something I kind of learned through here. And so then I moved to New York. I was there for 5 years, completed my PhD. And yeah, so it's at the American Museum of Natural History. And I worked with those, not the same sea anemones I told you about, but with sea anemones and jellyfish, doing sequencing and trying to understand how their nervous system works. They don't have brains, but they do have neurons. The basic question I wanted to answer was, how similar are their neurons to other neurons? And it turns out pretty similar, but not quite. And so within that, what I learned too is just being able to communicate. Communication is very crucial. Being able to talk about your science, being able to write about it, being able to read about it. Because, we're all kind of here have our basic level, foundational level of science. But when we go out to the public, right, they're also interested in these questions and whatever we're doing. But being able to kind of limit the jargon, being able to talk to them as to why you're doing what you're doing. They had us do exercises such as a 30-second elevator speech, where literally you get in an elevator, It goes up 3 floors. And within those 30 seconds, you kind of had to tell the person next to you what your science is and be able to kind of hook them and get them reeled into, your project. And I think one of the major things I learned was just kind of to ask for help. So I was very proud when it came to that. I didn't want to ask for help because, mainly imposter syndrome, right? Which is the idea like you don't belong where you are. But I realized that wasn't smart to do because I wasn't kind of I wasn't making progress. And so in order to kind of get around that, I'm going to ask for help. And that's fine because we don't know it all, right? Like even at this stage where I thought I knew a lot, right? And that's completely fine because if you already knew everything there is to biology, to chemistry, to geology, you wouldn't be here, right? You would be at home writing articles, writing like 100 articles a year because you already have the knowledge, right? But we're here to learn about it. And that's completely fine. And we know that, there's going to be times where we need to ask for that help. And so then I moved back to Houston, that's when I first learned about public health as a career, but I learned through it via the education side. So I worked at the Health Museum for like a year and a half or so. And then from there, same thing, just highlighting the communication. I got to do experiments with people of all ages, elementary school students, kindergarten students, high school students, nursing students, adults, and being able to kind of explain to them the science and what the experiment meant. And like the 45 seconds they're going to pay attention to me, right? Like, so you kind of have to do that as on the go. And so then COVID hit, and while I do, and I still do have a passion for education and outreach, I was like at a crossroads where I wanted to help out my community and, give back more so than I could. I was working from home. It was good. But then whenever I saw that things were kind of heading for the long run, I wanted to put my practical skills to use as well. And so that's when I decided to work for the Houston Health Department and kind of help people, right? So quote unquote help people, that's subjective, right? I learned that, right, you can say that you want to be a physician because you want to help people, and that's great. But there's many ways to do so, right? So you kind of have to find out why exactly being a physician or being in public health is the exact way that works for you to be able to help people. Because, there's plenty of different ways to be able to do so. And so, being there, I've been able to do, leadership trainings, advance my career in that regard. One thing that I learned too is, just being organized. It's crucial. Organization, within that, you have communication. That's important because, right, we're dealing with, you want to feel good. If you go get a COVID test, you want to know that when we receive it, we're organized enough to know that that's your test, and we're organized to know that it's positive or negative. And like, we're absolutely sure of that, right? So that's important to know. And then within that, right, just this idea of like just giving back to the community. And so, it's just been an exciting time. Whatever's next is next, but, I know that at least the current position I'm in, it's something I want to be for a while. And so finally, we come to how this relates to you. And so here's a couple of websites. And so the first one is for internships. I don't know if you can scan that. If you can't, you can also just Google that, Public Health Lab internships opportunities. And those are paid. And so within that, you have to do an application. And then from the application, you're put onto a pool. And then in that pool, they're able to match you with a supervisor. And then they'll reach out to you, if there's a match there. They do have office hours, I think, on Tuesdays or Thursdays online. I would say take advantage of those. Get your name out there. One thing I would do during office hours with my professors is I would go even if I knew the subject because you kind of want them to, know who you are, recognize your face. Fellowships are also available. So these internships are for if you're still I think this applies to most of you. If next year, let's say you're still going to be here at UHC, fellowships are ideal if you're going to probably graduate, this semester or the next semester. And then finally, within the Houston Health Departments, we also have our own website, governmentjobs.com/careers/Houston, if you want to check those out as well. And so we're about to wrap up this on my second to final slide. If I'm going to ask you just one quick favor, if you can just go here and take this survey, and be as honest as you can if you found this helpful or not. This is an ongoing project. We want to get as much feedback as possible and be able to deliver the best we can for you. And so while you're doing that, I think everybody got it. I'm just going to go ahead and thank you. Here's my information if you have any questions. And, I'm happy to answer any and all questions you have. Here's some prompts for questions if you can't think of any that I can also talk about, because as you can see, I can talk for a while. So thank you. Any questions? If not, I'll just talk about these last few points I had that didn't quite fit into the story, but there's still important things I want to highlight. So the first one is the last one, which is be smart. That's probably obvious and kind of redundant and funny, but as I said that, right, as I said to you, be smart, that probably meant a lot of different things to each of you, right? Being smart might be being able to read a textbook once and be able to memorize everything there, or being smart might be you read a book and then you get creative ideas as to how to solve your problem. To me, there isn't a single definition of that. It's whatever you want it to be. But what I mean by that is you have to be smart with yourself. And so what I mean by that is that, like, you're still at a point where you can mold your study routine in an optimized way. And so for me, I realized that I wanted to learn about myself. So I wanted to learn if I am more productive in the morning or in the lunchtime or evening. I wanted to know if taking notes on a notebook was better or on the iPad or typing them. I wanted to learn if I needed to go on YouTube and watch videos or if I can read. All of that, test all those ideas that you have time. It might feel like you don't have time right now, but find some time. And that's how I mean be smart. Be smart and be able to know what your optimized way of learning is. Another, as we're kind of wrapping up here, another one I want to highlight is just becoming an expert. So it took me a while to kind of understand what that meant, but that's something that doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like, for example, when you do your PhD, if that's a route you want to take, you basically, I took a year and a half of classes, and then the rest of that was just doing research and coming up with my own questions, developing my own experiments, tracking my own data. And then after that, you have to write that up. So I ended up writing like a 136-page dissertation. And so then you have to summarize that and present it to like an audience, kind of like I have here, give them a 30, 45-minute presentation and kind of convince them that you were worth the 5 years, right? The money and the investment. And then the next morning, right, I'm like, I'm going to feel like a doctor. But I didn't. Like, I felt the same because it's not like an overnight switch thing, right? It's a gradual growth to becoming an expert. And that starts here, like biology 1301, like it starts there. You're becoming an expert. And the reason that's important is because, you want to be able to provide, if you're going to go down a career where you're providing services to people, you want to be as, the best thing you can be, right? Just as you would want when you go to the mechanic, when you go get some food, when you go to the doctor, you want them to provide you the optimum service they can have. You kind of give that back to everybody as well. And I would say, the final one I would highlight here is kind of either being the first or like continuing the legacy. And so what I mean by that is, you don't have to raise your hand, just kind of internally think about it. Being a first-generation student, right? I'm one of those, meaning that, my basically, up until now, right, if you look back in my legacy, in my like bloodline or whatever, no one else has done what I've done, right? And that sounds a little cocky, but it's the truth. And same thing with you. Like, if you're the first one in here, right, you're doing basically things that have not been done before. Of course, we can talk about maybe that's because opportunities were lacking, and that's true. But, our family decided to make the move here because those opportunities are here. And so I would say just, seize the opportunity, take advantage of that. It's, a great opportunity you have. And if you're not the first gen, right, that's fine too, because you're going to continue the legacy. If your parents went to college too, they had that opportunity, then you kind of keep that going for everybody within your family, right? And so, within that, I think the other ones kind of speak for themselves. So Yeah, if there are no questions, then I want to once again thank you for coming. Hopefully, you took at least one thing you're going to remember in a week from now. Yeah, so thank you.